Glossary. For social psychology, actor-observer difference. A difference in attribution based on who is making the causal assessment. The actor, who is relatively inclined to make situational attributions, or the observer, who is relatively inclined to make dispositional attributions. Actual self. The self that people believe they are. See also ideal self, ought self. Effective forecasting. Predicting future emotions, such as whether an event will result in happiness or anger or sadness, and for how long. Affect misattribution procedure, AMP. A priming procedure designed to assess people's implicit associations to different stimuli, including their associations to various ethnic, racial, occupational, and lifestyle groups. So it's like implicit bias. Agenda control. Efforts of the media to select certain events and topics to emphasize, thereby shaping which issues and events people think are important. Altruism. Pro-social behavior that benefits others without regard to consequences for oneself. Anxiety dimension of attachment. A facet of attachment that captures the degree to which a person is worried about rejection and abandonment by relationship partners. See also avoidance dimension of attachment. Applied science. Science or research concerned with solving important real-world problems. See also basic science. Approach inhibition theory. A theory maintaining that high-power individuals are inclined to go after their goals and make quick and sometimes rash judgments, whereas low-power individuals are more likely to constrain their behavior and pay careful attention to others. Attachment theory. The idea that early attachments with parents and other caregivers can shape relationships for a person's whole life. Attitude. An evaluation of an object in a positive or negative fashion that includes three components: affect, cognition, and behavior. Attitude inoculation. Small attacks on people's beliefs that engage their pre-existing attitudes, prior commitments, and background knowledge, enabling them to counteract a subsequent larger attack and thus resist persuasion. Attribution theory. A set of concepts explaining how people assign causes to the events around them and the effects of these kinds of causal assessments. Audience characteristics. Characteristics of those who receive a persuasive message, including need for cognition, mood, and age. Augmentation principle. The idea that people will assign greater weight to a particular cause of behavior if other causes are present that would normally produce a different outcome. See also discounting principle. Authority. Power that derives from institutionalized roles or arrangements. Availability heuristic. The process whereby judgments of frequency or probability are based on how readily pertinent instances come to mind. See also representativeness heuristic. Avoidance dimension of attachment. A facet of attachment that captures the degree to which a person is comfortable with intimacy and dependence on relationship partners. See also anxiety dimension of attachment. Base rate information. Information about the relative frequency of events or of members of different categories in a population. Basic science. Science or research concerned with trying to understand some phenomenon in its own right, with a view toward using that understanding to build valid theories about the nature of some aspect of the world. See also applied science. Basking in reflected glory. Taking pride in the accomplishments of other people in one's group, such as when sports fans identify with a winning team. Better than average effect. The finding that most people think they are above average on various personality traits and ability dimensions. Bottom-up processing. Data-driven mental processing in which an individual forms conclusions based on the stimuli encountered in the environment. See also top-down processes. Broaden and build hypothesis. The idea that positive emotions broaden thoughts and actions, helping people build social resources. Bystander intervention. Assistance given by a witness to someone in need. Causal attribution. Linking an event to a cause, such as inferring that a personality trait is responsible for a behavior. Central root. A route to persuasion wherein people think carefully and deliberately about the content of a persuasive message, attending to its logic and the strength of its arguments, as well as to related evidence and principles. See also peripheral route. Cognitive dissonance theory. The theory that inconsistency between a person's thoughts, sentiments, and actions creates an aversive emotional state, dissonance, that leads to efforts to restore consistency. Communal relationship. A relationship in which the individuals feel a special responsibility for one another and give and receive according to the principle of need. Such relationships are often long-term. See also exchange relationship. Comparison level. Expectations people have about what they think they deserve or expect to get out of a relationship. Comparison level for alternatives. Expectations people have about what they can get out of available alternative relationships. Complementarity. The tendency for people to seek out others with characteristics that are different from and complement their own. Compliance. Responding favorably to an explicit request by another person. Confirmation bias. The tendency to test a proposition by searching for evidence that would support it. Conformity. Changing one's behavior or beliefs in response to explicit or implicit pressure, real or imagined, from others. Consensus. A type of covariation information, whether most people would behave the same way or differently in a given situation. See also consistency, distinctiveness. Consistency. A type of covariation, whether an individual behaves the same way or differently in a given situation on different occasions. See also consensus, distinctiveness. Construal. One's interpretation of or inference about the stimuli or situations that one confronts. Construal level theory. A theory about the relationship between temporal distance and other kinds of distance and abstract or concrete thinking. Psychologically distant actions and events are thought about in abstract terms. Actions and events that are close at hand are thought about in concrete terms. Contact hypothesis. The proposition that prejudice can be reduced by putting members of majority and minority groups in frequent contact with each other. Contingencies of self-worth. A perspective maintaining that people's self-esteem is contingent on the successes and failures in domains on which they have based their self-worth. Control condition. A condition comparable to the experimental condition in every way, except that it lacks the one ingredient hypothesized to produce the expected effect on the dependent variable. Correlational research. Research that involves measuring two or more variables and assessing whether there is a relationship between them. Counterfactual thinking. Thoughts of what might have, could have, or should have happened if only something had occurred differently. Covariation principle. The idea that behavior should be attributed to potential causes that occur along with the observed behavior. Culture of honor. A culture defined by its members' strong concerns about their own and others' reputations, leading to sensitivity to insults and a willingness to use violence to avenge any perceived wrong. Death-qualified jury. A jury from which prospective jurors who would never recommend the death penalty have been excluded. Debriefing. In preliminary versions of an experiment, asking participants directly if they understood the instructions, found the setup to be reasonable, and so on. In later versions, debriefing is used to educate participants about the questions being studied. Deception research. Research in which the participants are misled about the purpose of the research or the meaning of something that is done to them. Dehumanization. The attribution of non-human characteristics and denial of human qualities to groups other than one's own. De-individuation. A reduced sense of individual identity, accompanied by diminished self-regulation that can come over people when they are in a large group. Dependent variable. In experimental research, the variable that is measured, as opposed to manipulated, it is hypothesized to be affected by manipulation of the independent variable. Descriptive norm. The behavior exhibited by most people in a given context. See also prescriptive norm. Diffusion of responsibility. A reduction of the sense of urgency to help someone in an emergency or dangerous situation based on the assumption that others who are present will help. Discounting principle. The idea that people will assign reduced weight to a particular cause of behavior if other plausible causes might have produced it. See also augmentation principle. Discrimination. Favorable or unfavorable treatment of individuals based on their membership in a particular group. Display rule. A culturally specific rule that governs how, when, to whom people express emotion. Dispositions. Internal factors such as beliefs, values, personality traits, and abilities that guide a person's behavior. Distinctiveness. A type of covariation information, whether a behavior is unique to a particular situation or occurs in many or all situations. See also consensus, consistency. Dominance, behavior enacted with the goal of acquiring or demonstrating power. Dominant response, in a person's hierarchy of possible responses in any context, the response that person is most likely to make. Duration neglect, giving relative unimportance of the length of an emotional experience, whether pleasurable or unpleasant, in judging and remembering the overall experience. Effort justification, the tendency to reduce dissonance by justifying the time, effort, or money devoted to something that turned out to be unpleasant or disappointing. Elaboration likelihood model, ELM, a model of persuasion maintaining that there are two different routes to persuasion, the central route and the peripheral route. Emotion, a brief, specific response, both psychological and physiological, that helps people meet goals, many of which are social. Emotional amplification, an increase in an emotional reaction to an event that is proportional to how easy it is to imagine the event not happening. Empathic concern, identifying with someone in need, including feeling and understanding what that person is experiencing, accompanied by the intention to help the person. Entity theory of intelligence, the belief that intelligence is something people are born with and cannot change. See also incremental theory of intelligence. Equity theory, the idea that people are motivated to pursue fairness or equity in their relationship. A relationship is considered equitable when the benefits are proportionate to the effort both people put into it. Ethnocentrism, glorifying one's own group while vilifying other groups. Evaluation apprehension, people's concern about how they might appear in the eyes of others or be evaluated by them. Exchange relationship, a relationship in which individuals feel little responsibility toward one another. Giving and receiving are governed by concerns about equity and reciprocity. Such relationships are usually short-term. See also communal relationship. Experimental research. In social psychology, research that randomly assigns people to different conditions or situations and that enables researchers to make strong inferences about why a relationship exists or how different situations affect behavior. Lets you make causation statements. Explanatory style, a person's habitual way of explaining events, typically assessed along three dimensions: internal, external, stable, unstable, and global, specific. External validity, how well the results of an experiment generalize to contexts outside the conditions of the laboratory. Face, the public image of ourself that we want others to believe. Field experiment, an experiment conducted in the real world, not a lab, usually with participants who are not aware they are in a study of any kind. Fluency, the feeling of ease or difficulty associated with processing information. Focal emotion, an emotion that is especially common within a particular culture. Focalism, a tendency to focus too much on a central aspect of an event while neglecting the possible impact of associated factors or other events. Foot in the door technique, a compliance approach that involves making an initial small request with which nearly everyone complies, followed by a larger request involving the real behavior of interest. Framing effect, the influence on judgment resulting from the way information is presented, such as the order of presentation or the wording. Functional distance, the influence of an architectural layout to encourage or inhibit certain activities, including contact between people. Fundamental attribution error, the failure to recognize the importance of situational influences on behavior, along with the corresponding tendency to overemphasize the importance of dispositions on behavior. Gestalt psychology, based on the German word Gestalt, meaning form or figure, an approach that stresses the fact that people perceive objects not by means of some automatic registering device, but by active, usually unconscious interpretation of what the object represents as a whole. Group polarization, the tendency for group decisions to be more extreme than those made by individuals. Whatever way the group as a whole is leaning, group discussion tends to make it lean further in that direction. Groupthink, faulty thinking by members of highly cohesive groups in which the critical scrutiny that should be devoted to the issues at hand is subverted by social pressures to reach consensus. Halo effect. The common belief, accurate or not, that attractive individuals possess a host of positive qualities beyond their physical appearance. Heuristics. Intuitive mental operations, performed quickly and automatically, that provide efficient answers to common problems of judgment. Hindsight bias. People's tendency to be overconfident about whether they could have predicted a given outcome. Hostile aggression. Behavior intended to harm another, either physically or psychologically, and motivated by feelings of anger and hostility. See also instrumental aggression. Hypothesis. A prediction about what will happen under particular circumstances. Ideal self. The self that embodies people's wishes and aspirations. See also actual self, ought self. Identifiable victim effect. The tendency to be more moved by the vivid plight of a single individual than by a more abstract number of people. Ideomotor action. The phenomenon whereby merely thinking about a behavior makes performing it more likely. Illusory correlation. The belief that two variables are correlated when in fact they are not. Immune neglect. The tendency for people to underestimate their capacity to be resilient in responding to difficult life events, which leads them to overestimate the extent to which life's problems will reduce their personal well-being. Implementation intention. An if-then plan to engage in a goal-directed behavior, then whenever a particular cue, if, is encountered. Implicit association test, IAT. A technique for revealing non-conscious attitudes toward different stimuli, particularly groups of people. Implicit attitude measure. An indirect measure of attitudes that does not involve a self-report. Inclusive fitness. According to evolutionary theory, the fitness of an individual is based on reproductive success and the passing of one's own genes and those of relatives to future generations. Incremental theory of intelligence. The belief that intelligence is something people can improve by working at it. See also entity theory of intelligence. Independent, individualistic culture. A culture in which people tend to think of themselves as distinct social entities, tied to each other by voluntary bonds of affection and organizational memberships, but essentially separate from other people and having attributes that exist in the absence of any connection to others. See also interdependent, collectivistic culture. Independent variable. In experimental research, the variable that is manipulated, it is hypothesized to be the cause of a particular outcome. Individuation. An enhanced sense of individual identity produced by focusing attention on the self, which generally leads people to act carefully and deliberately and in accordance with their sense of propriety and values. Induced, forced compliance. Subtly compelling people to behave in a manner that is inconsistent with their beliefs, attitudes, or values in order to elicit dissonance and therefore a change in their original attitudes and values. Informational social influence. The influence of other people that results from taking their comments or actions as a source of information about what is correct, proper, or effective. See also normative social influence. Informed consent. A person signed agreement to participate in a procedure or research study after learning all of its relevant aspects. Institutional Review Board, IRB. A committee that examines research proposals and makes judgments about the ethical appropriateness of the research. Instrumental aggression. Behavior intended to harm another in the service of motives other than pure hostility, such as attracting attention, acquiring wealth, or advancing political or ideological causes. See also hostile aggression. Interdependent collectivistic culture. A culture in which people tend to define themselves as part of a collective, inextricably tied to others in their group and placing less importance on individual freedom or personal control over their lives. See also independent, individualistic culture. Internalization. Private acceptance of a proposition, orientation, or ideology. Internal validity. In experimental research, the likelihood that only the manipulated variable could have produced the results. Intervention, an effort to change designed behavior. Investment model of commitment, a model of interpersonal relationships, maintaining that three determinants make partners more committed to each other: relationship satisfaction, few alternative partners, and investments in the relationship. Just world hypothesis, the belief that people get what they deserve in life and deserve what they get. Kin selection, an evolutionary strategy that favors the reproductive success of one's genetic relatives, even at a cost to one's own survival and reproduction. Likert scale, a numerical scale used to assess people's attitudes, a scale that includes a set of possible answers with labeled anchors on each extreme. Longitudinal study, a study conducted over a long period of time with the same participants. Measurement validity, the correlation between a measure and some outcome the measure is supposed to predict. Mere exposure effect, the idea that repeated exposure to a stimulus, such as an object or a person, leads to a greater liking of the stimulus. Message characteristics, aspects or content of a persuasive message, including the quality of the evidence and the explicitness of its conclusions. Metacognition, secondary thoughts that are reflections on primary thoughts, cognitions. Minimal group paradigm, an experimental paradigm in which researchers create groups based on arbitrary and seemingly meaningless criteria and then examine how the members of these minimal groups are inclined to behave toward one another. Modern racism, prejudice directed at racial groups that exist alongside the rejection of explicitly racist beliefs. Moral foundations theory, a theory proposing that there are 5 evolved universal moral domains in which specific emotions guide moral judgments. Natural experiment, a naturally occurring event or phenomenon having somewhat different conditions that can be compared with almost as much rigor as in experiments where the investigator manipulates the conditions. Naturalistic fallacy, the claim that the way things are is the way they should be. Natural selection, an evolutionary process that molds animals and plants so that traits that enhance the probability of survival and reproduction are passed on to subsequent generations. Negative state relief hypothesis, the idea that people engage in certain actions, such as agreeing to a request, to relieve their negative feelings and feel better about themselves. Normative social influence, the influence of other people that comes from the desire to avoid their disapproval and other social sanctions, ridicule, barbs, ostracism. See also informational social influence. Norms of reciprocity, a norm dictating that people should provide benefits to those who benefit them. Obedience, in an unequal power relationship, submitting to the demands of the person in authority. Open science, practices such as sharing data and research materials with anyone in the broader scientific community in an effort to increase the integrity and replicability of scientific research. Ought self, the self that is concerned with the duties, obligations, and external demands people feel they are compelled to honor. See also actual self, ideal self. Outgroup homogeneity effect, the tendency for people to assume that within-group similarity is much stronger for outgroups than for in-groups. Own race identification bias, the tendency for people to be better able to recognize and distinguish faces from their own race than from other races. Paired distinctiveness, the pairing of 2 distinctive events that stand out even more because they occur together. Parental investment, the evolutionary principle that costs and benefits are associated with reproduction and the nurturing of offspring. Because these costs and benefits are different for males and females, one gender will normally value and invest more in each child than will the other. Females invest more, men invest less. Peripheral route, a route to persuasion wherein people attend to relatively easy to process, superficial cues related to a persuasive message, such as its length or the expertise or attractiveness of the source of the message. See also central route. Personal distress, a motive for helping others in distress that may arise from a need to reduce one's own distress. Pluralistic ignorance, misperception of a group norm that results from observing people who are acting at variance with their private beliefs out of a concern for the social consequences. Those actions reinforce the erroneous group norm. Power, the ability to control one's own outcomes and those of others, the freedom to act. Precarious manhood hypothesis, the idea that a man's gender identity of strength and toughness may be lost under various conditions and that such a loss can trigger aggressive behavior. Prejudice, an attitude or affective response, positive or negative, toward a group and its individual members. Prescriptive norm, the way a person is supposed to behave in a given context, also called injunctive norm. See also descriptive norm. Prevention focus, self-regulation of behavior with respect to ought self-standards, a focus on avoiding negative outcomes through avoidance-related behaviors. See also promotion focus. Primacy effect, a type of order effect, the disproportionate influence on judgment by information presented first in a body of evidence. See also recency effect. Priming, the presentation of information designed to activate a concept, such as a stereotype, and hence make it accessible. A prime is the stimulus presented to activate the concept in question. Prisoner's dilemma, a situation involving payoffs to two people who must decide whether to cooperate or defect. In the end, trust and cooperation lead to higher joint payoffs than mistrust and defection. Procedural justice, assessments of whether the process leading to legal outcomes are fair. Promotion focus, self-regulation of behavior with respect to ideal self-standards, a focus on attaining positive outcomes through approach-related behaviors. See also prevention focus. Psychological stress, the sense that challenges and demands surpass one's current capacities, resources, and energies. Random assignment, assigning participants in experimental research to different groups randomly, so they are as likely to be assigned to one condition as to another. Rape-prone culture, a culture in which rape tends to be used as an act of war against enemy women, as a ritual act, or as a threat against women to keep them subservient to men. Reactance theory, the idea that people reassert their prerogatives in response to the unpleasant state of arousal they experience when they believe their freedoms are threatened. Reactive devaluation, attaching less value to an offer in a negotiation once the opposing group makes it. Realistic group conflict theory, a theory that group conflict, prejudice, and discrimination are likely to arise over competition between groups for limited resources. Recency effect, a type of order effect, the disproportionate influence on judgment by information presented last in a body of evidence. See also primacy effect. Reciprocal altruism, helping others with the expectation that they will probably return the favor in the future. Reciprocal concessions technique, a compliance approach that involves asking someone for a very large favor that will certainly be refused, and then following that request with one for a smaller favor, which tends to be seen as a concession the target feels compelled to honor, also called door-in-the-face technique. Reflected self-appraisal, a belief about what others think of oneself. Regression effect, this statistical tendency, when two variables are imperfectly correlated, for extreme values of one of them to be associated with less extreme values of the other. Regression fallacy, the failure to recognize the influence of the regression effect and to offer a causal theory for what is really a simple statistical regularity. Reliability, the degree to which the particular way researchers measure a given variable is likely to yield consistent results. Replication, reproduction of research results by the original investigator or by someone else. Representativeness heuristic, the process whereby judgments of likelihood are based on assessments of similarity between individuals and group prototypes or between cause and effect. See also availability heuristic. Reproductive fitness, the capacity to pass one's genes on to subsequent generations. Reputation, the collective beliefs, evaluations, and impressions people hold about an individual within a social network. Response latency, the amount of time it takes to respond to a stimulus, such as an attitude question. Rumination, the tendency to think about a stressful event repeatedly. Schema, a knowledge structure consisting of any organized body of stored information that is used to help in understanding events. Scientific jury selection, a statistical approach to jury selection whereby members of different demographic groups in the community are asked their attitudes toward various issues related to a trial, and defense and prosecuting attorneys try to influence the selection of jurors accordingly. Self-affirmation theory, the idea that people can maintain an overall sense of self-worth following psychologically threatening information by affirming a valued aspect of themselves unrelated to the threat. Self-awareness theory, A theory maintaining that when people focus their attention inward on themselves, they become concerned with self-evaluation and how their current behavior conforms to their internal standards and values. Self-censorship, withholding information or opinions in group discussions. Self-discrepancy theory, a theory that behavior is motivated by standards reflecting ideal and ought selves. Falling short of these standards produces specific emotions, dejection-related emotions in the case of actual ideal discrepancies, and agitation-related emotions in the case of actual ought discrepancies. Self-distancing, the ability to focus on one's feelings from the perspective of a detached observer. Self-enhancement, the desire to maintain, increase, or protect one's positive self-views. Self-esteem, the overall positive or negative evaluation people have of themselves. Self-fulfilling prophecy, the tendency for people to act in ways that bring about the very thing they expect to happen. Self-handicapping, the tendency to engage in self-defeating behavior in order to have an excuse ready should one perform poorly or fail. Self-monitoring, the tendency to monitor one's behavior to fit the current situation. Self-perception theory, the theory that people come to know their own attitudes by looking at their behavior and the context in which it occurred and inferring what their attitude must be. Self-presentation, presenting the person we would like others to believe we are. Self-regulation, processes by which people initiate, alter, and control their behavior in the pursuit of goals, including the ability to resist short-term rewards that thwart the attainment of long-term goals. Self-schema, a cognitive structure derived from past experience that represents a person's beliefs and feelings about the self, both in general and in specific situations. Self-selection, in correlational research, the situation in which the participant, rather than the researcher, determines the participant's level of each variable, for example, whether they are married or not, or how many hours per day they spend playing video games, thereby creating the problem that it could be these unknown other properties that are responsible for the observed relationship. Self-serving attributional bias, the tendency to attribute failure and other bad events to external circumstances, and to attribute success and other good events to oneself. Self-validation hypothesis, the idea that feeling confident about our thoughts validates those thoughts, making it more likely that we'll be swayed in their direction. Self-verification theory, the theory that people sometimes strive for stable, subjectively accurate beliefs about themselves because such self-views give them a sense of coherence and predictability. Sleeper effect, an effect that occurs when a persuasive message from an unreliable source initially exerts little influence, but later causes attitudes to shift. Social class, the amount of wealth, education, and occupational prestige individuals and their families have. Social comparison theory, the idea that people compare themselves with other people to obtain an accurate assessment of their own opinions, abilities, and internal states. Social exchange theory, a theory based on the idea that how people feel about a relationship depends on their assessment of its costs and rewards. Social facilitation, initially a term for enhanced performance in the presence of others, now a broader term for the effect, positive or negative, of the presence of others on performance. Social identity theory, the idea that a person's self-concept and self-esteem derive not only from personal identity and accomplishments, but also from the status and accomplishments of the various groups to which the person belongs. Social influence, the many ways people affect one another, including changes in attitudes, beliefs, feelings, and behavior resulting from the comments, actions, or even the mere presence of others. See also informational social influence, normative social influence. Social intuitionist model of moral judgment, the idea that people first have fast, emotional reactions to morally relevant events, which influence the way they reason to arrive at a judgment of right or wrong. Social loafing, the tendency to exert less effort when working on a group task in which individual contributions cannot be monitored. Social psychology, the scientific study of the feelings, thoughts, and behaviors of individuals in social situations. Social reward, A benefit such as praise, positive attention, something tangible, or gratitude that may be gained from helping others and thus serves as a motive for altruistic behavior. Sociometer hypothesis. The idea that self-esteem is an internal, subjective index or marker of the extent to which a person is included or looked on favorably by others. Source characteristics. Characteristics of the person who delivers a persuasive message, such as attractiveness, credibility, and certainty. Spotlight effect. People's conviction that other people are attending to them, to their appearance and behavior, more than they actually are. Statistical significance. A measure of the probability that a given result could have occurred by chance. Status. The outcome of an evaluation of attributes that produces differences in respect and prominence. Stereotype. A belief that certain attributes are characteristic of members of a particular group. Stereotype threat. The fear of confirming the stereotypes that others have about one's group. Subliminal. Below the threshold of conscious awareness. Subtyping. Explaining away exceptions to a given stereotype by creating a subcategory of the stereotyped group that can be expected to differ from the group as a whole. Superordinate goal. A goal that transcends the interests of any one group and can be achieved more readily by two or more groups working together. System justification theory. The theory that people are motivated to see the existing socio-political system as desirable, fair, and legitimate. Terror management theory, TMT. The theory that people deal with the potentially crippling anxiety associated with the knowledge of the inevitability of death by striving for symbolic immortality through preserving valued cultural worldviews and believing they have lived up to the culture's standards. Theory. A set of related propositions intended to describe some phenomenon or aspect of the world. Third variable. A variable, often measured in correlational research, that can be the true explanation for the relationship between two other variables. Thought polarization hypothesis. The hypothesis that more extended thought about a particular issue tends to produce a more extreme, entrenched attitude. Tit-for-tat strategy. A strategy in the prisoner's dilemma game in which the player's first move is cooperative. Thereafter, the player mimics the other person's behavior, whether cooperative or competitive. This strategy fares well when used against other strategies. Top-down processing. Theory-driven mental processing, in which an individual filters and interprets new information in light of pre-existing knowledge and expectations. See also bottom-up processing. Voir dire. The portion of a trial in U.S. courts in which prospective jurors are questioned about potential biases and a jury is selected. Volunteerism. Assistance a person regularly provides to another person or group with no expectation of compensation. Working self-concept. A subset of self-knowledge that is brought to mind in a particular context.